It happened at what was supposed to be a warm family dinner. The kind of evening where children chase each other around the table legs and grown-ups pass dishes with fake smiles. Instead, it turned into a moment that sliced through me like glass. One of them looked at my daughter, barely 10 years old, and said it clearly enough for the entire room to hear. "You're not family." For a second, I thought I misheard. Maybe they were joking. Maybe it was a cruel slip of the tongue. But no one corrected it. No one softened it. My daughter's fork clattered against her plate. She looked up at me with wide eyes, searching for an anchor. My chest tightened, but my hand reached instinctively for hers. I squeezed her small fingers and whispered, "It's okay." Inside, it was not okay. My pulse pounded in my ears, every beat like a drum echoing the insult. But on the surface, I was still. I had learned that calmness was a weapon, sharper than shouting. If I exploded, they would twist it, call me dramatic, say I had embarrassed myself. If I stayed quiet but firm, I could watch them unravel without giving them the satisfaction of seeing me lose control. The room carried on in that strange, brittle way families do when something ugly has been dropped on the table. My mother-in-law refilled a wine glass. My sister-in-law pretended to laugh at something on her phone. My husband stared at his plate, jaw tight, pretending he hadn't heard. My daughter's shoulders trembled, but she stayed glued to me. I could feel her confusion pressing into my skin through her grip. 10 years old is too young to hear words like that. Too young to be branded as an outsider by people who should be protecting her. I looked at her and thought of every birthday candle she had blown out, every drawing she had taped proudly to the fridge, every night she had fallen asleep, believing this family was hers too. All of that shattered in a single sentence. I took a slow sip of water, my hands steady even as my stomach churned. "Eat, sweetheart," I told her softly. She nodded, lifted her fork again, but the sparkle in her eyes was gone. Across the table, my mother-in-law tilted her head as if daring me to respond. She wanted me to break. She wanted me to create a scene so she could later say, "See how unstable she is?" Instead, I smiled faintly, the kind of smile that hides a blade. I let the conversation stumble forward, without my participation. My daughter leaned against me. I stroked her hair once, a silent promise that this would not be forgotten. Dinner dragged on, each minute heavy. I heard the scrape of knives, the clink of glasses, the forced small talk about work schedules and weather forecasts. Beneath it all was the echo of those words, "You're not family." They hung in the air like smoke, staining everything. I thought about standing up and leaving right then, but something in me decided otherwise. I needed to see how far they would go. I needed to gather what I could without tipping my hand. So I stayed, my face calm, my voice measured. I even asked for more potatoes, though each bite felt like swallowing gravel. My daughter pressed her cheek against my arm. At one point, she whispered so softly I almost missed it. "Mom, did I do something wrong?" My throat ached. "No, darling," I whispered back. "You did nothing wrong." I kissed the top of her head, fighting back the burn of tears. I refused to let them see me cry. When dessert was served, I declined. I gathered our things slowly, not rushing, not giving them any hint of victory. My daughter clutched her little bag, her eyes still damp. As we left, no one stopped us. Not one of them apologized. Not one tried to fix what had been broken. The night air outside was cold and sharp. It cleared my head. I buckled my daughter into the car seat, kissed her forehead, and told her we were going home. She nodded, her voice small. "Can we just go home?" "Yes," I said. "We're going home." The drive back was quiet. She fell asleep halfway, her head leaning against the window. I kept glancing at her in the rearview mirror, my heart breaking all over again. I thought of the way she looked when she first walked into that dinner, so hopeful in her little dress, carrying the card she had made for her grandparents. She had been excited to give it to them. They had barely looked at it before setting it aside like junk mail. When we pulled into our driveway, I sat in the car for a moment, watching her sleep. My chest burned with the weight of what had happened. I knew I couldn't just let it go. The cruelty had crossed a line that could never be uncrossed. I carried her inside, tucked her into bed, and kissed her cheek as she stirred. "Sleep, sweetheart," I whispered. "Mommy's here." Then I sat alone in the living room, staring at the dark window. I replayed the words again and again. You're not family. I thought about how calm I had been, how I had hidden my fury under that thin smile, and I thought about the small recording device I had slipped into my purse earlier, a habit I had developed after too many dinners where insults flew like arrows. I pulled it out and pressed play. The words were there, captured in their own voices. Clear, undeniable, proof. My hand shook slightly as I set the device on the table. I imagined my daughter hearing those words again someday, but this time, as evidence, not as a wound. The night stretched long. I drafted a message on my phone, erased it, drafted again. Should I call them out directly? Should I blast the recording across the family group chat? Or should I take the quiet, deliberate path that would leave them stunned? By midnight, I had decided. I copied the recording to a secure folder and backed it up. Then I typed out a short message to a local officer I knew from community meetings. Just a simple line. I have evidence of verbal abuse directed at my child tonight. Can we talk in the morning? I hit send before I could second-guess myself. The weight lifted slightly. Not gone, but lighter. I went to check on my daughter one more time. She was sleeping peacefully, her hair fanned out on the pillow, her hand curled into a loose fist. I tucked the blanket around her and whispered a promise. They won't hurt you again. I'll make sure of it. When dawn began to creep through the blinds, my phone buzzed with a reply. The officer confirmed a time to meet, said he'd bring someone from the Child Protection Unit. My heart steadied. The calmness I had shown at that dinner was only the beginning. By morning, the police were involved, and the people who told my daughter she was not family were about to learn what that really meant. The morning of that dinner had started with so much innocence, it still hurts to replay it. My daughter woke earlier than usual, her hair tangled, but her eyes bright. She had laid out her dress the night before, carefully smoothing it on the chair beside her bed. It was nothing fancy, just a soft blue cotton dress with tiny embroidered flowers at the hem. But to her, it felt like something special, something that made her belong. "Does this look okay, Mom?" she asked as she twirled in front of the mirror. Her voice carried that mix of hope and nervousness only a child can have. I told her she looked beautiful, because she did, and because she needed to hear it. She smiled, but there was hesitation in her eyes, like she was bracing for someone else not to agree. We spent the late morning together making a card. She had insisted on it. "I want Grandma and Grandpa to know I'm glad we're invited," she explained, pulling out markers and stickers. She drew a big heart on the front and wrote their names carefully, each letter shaped with concentration. Inside she wrote, "Thank you for always including me." When she read it aloud, her voice cracked slightly, but she grinned anyway. I watched her pour herself into that card and felt a pang. She was trying so hard to earn a place that should have been hers without question. Every child deserves to feel like they belong at their own family's table. Yet, here was my daughter, treating an invitation like a prize she had to win. Before we left, she asked if she could wear the little necklace her father had given her last Christmas. It was a simple silver chain with a tiny star charm, but she touched it like it was a crown. "Maybe Grandma will notice," she whispered. "She always notices Bella's jewelry." Bella was her cousin, the granddaughter who could do no wrong. I clipped the necklace around her neck and kissed the top of her head. "You don't need to be noticed to shine," I told her. She smiled, but again, that flicker of doubt lingered. On the drive to the dinner, she hummed softly, the card tucked safely in her lap. She kept asking questions. "Do you think they'll like my dress? Do you think Bella will want to sit with me? Do you think Grandpa will tell one of his funny stories?" Her voice carried so much hope it almost disguised the undercurrent of anxiety. I reassured her at every turn, though inside I felt the familiar weight of caution. We had been to enough of these gatherings to know the pattern. At first, they would be polite, sometimes even warm, but sooner or later, the small cuts would come. A comment about her hair, a joke about her manners, a comparison that left her feeling smaller than she was. One memory flashed as I drove. It was last Thanksgiving. She had brought a pumpkin pie she helped me bake, proud of the careful lattice crust we had woven together. She had set it on the table with both hands, smiling. My mother-in-law had glanced at it, then said loudly, "We already have the real dessert," pointing to the cake Bella had picked up from a bakery. The adults laughed. The pie sat untouched, and my daughter sat quietly beside me, pretending not to care. Another memory surfaced. At a summer barbecue, my daughter had joined the other kids playing tag. She ran fast, her laughter carrying across the yard. But when she tagged Bella, my sister-in-law pulled her aside and scolded her for being too rough. "You need to learn to be gentle," she said. Minutes later, Bella shoved her to the ground in the same game, and no one said a word. Each time, my daughter swallowed it down, pretending not to notice. But I noticed. I always noticed. That was why my chest tightened as we pulled into the driveway for this dinner. I told myself maybe this time would be different. Maybe they would see her for the sweet, bright child she islanded. Yet my gut told me otherwise. Inside the house, the air smelled of roasted meat and candles. Laughter floated from the dining room. My daughter clutched the card to her chest as we walked in. She looked so hopeful that it made my heart ache. My mother-in-law greeted us with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Oh, you're here," she said, her tone more surprised than welcoming. My daughter stepped forward shyly and handed her the card. "I made this for you," she said. My mother-in-law glanced at it, murmured, "Thank you," and set it aside near a stack of unopened mail. The flicker in my daughter's eyes dimmed, but she forced a smile. The evening unfolded slowly, the kind of ordinary chatter that masks the undercurrents of tension. My sister-in-law complimented Bella's new shoes, holding her foot up like a prized trophy. My daughter looked down at her own worn flats and shifted uncomfortably. I squeezed her hand under the table. My husband tried to make small talk about work. My father-in-law poured drinks with exaggerated cheer. On the surface, it looked like family, but beneath it, I could feel the cracks widening. Every time my daughter spoke, someone talked over her. Every time she laughed, someone shushed her. I kept watching, waiting, holding myself together. By the time the insult came, that searing, unforgettable line, my daughter had already been chipped at a dozen times in small, invisible ways. The ignored card, the lack of praise, the comparisons to Bella, the subtle reminders that she was not enough. When they finally said, "You're not family," it was not just a cruel remark. It was the culmination of years of dismissal and exclusion, condensed into one brutal moment. And yet, my daughter had walked into that dinner with her heart wide open, believing she might finally be accepted. That was the tragedy of it. Her little hands smoothing her dress, her careful handwriting in that card, her hopeful questions in the car. She wanted so badly to belong. When I look back, I realize the dinner had been doomed from the start. The signs were all there. The brittle smiles, the sidelong glances, the way my mother-in-law had set only 7 place settings, though there were 8 of us. I told myself not to overthink it, that maybe there was a spare chair somewhere, but no extra chair appeared. As the night wore on, my daughter's hope dwindled, replaced by that blank, brave face children put on when they're hurt but trying not to cry. And then came the words that broke through every layer of resilience she had built. "You're not family." Oh, it is one thing to suspect you are unwelcome. It is another to hear it declared aloud. That was the moment her world shifted. And that was the moment I knew I would not let it pass quietly this time. The words still rang in my head, as if someone had carved them into the walls. "You're not family." My daughter sat frozen beside me, her fork untouched, her lips trembling. I studied her face the way a parent does when something is deeply wrong. Her eyes had gone dim, her posture hunched as though she could fold herself into invisibility. The necklace she had been so proud to wear slipped sideways against her collarbone, catching the light but not her smile. I swallowed the lump in my throat and forced myself to keep breathing evenly. Every instinct in me screamed to stand up and shout, to demand they apologize, to flip the heavy dining table, if that was what it took to make them understand the cruelty they had inflicted on a 10-year-old. But another instinct, colder and sharper, told me to stay still, to watch, to let them show themselves fully. When my daughter whispered, "Mom, can we go home?" I bent down and kissed her hair. "Soon," I told her. Even though my own heart was already halfway out the door, I looked around the table. My mother-in-law was buttering a roll, as if nothing had happened. My sister-in-law scrolled through her phone, a smug smile tugging at the corner of her lips. Bella, the golden child, smirked and whispered something I could not catch. My husband sat rigid, his knuckles white around his glass. I finally spoke. My voice was calm but sharp enough to cut the air. "What did you just say to her?" I asked. My eyes locked on my mother-in-law. The clinking of silverware stopped. A hush fell over the table, the kind of silence that feels like the moment before thunder strikes. She looked up, feigning innocence. "Oh, don't be dramatic. It was a joke." "A joke?" I repeated slowly. "You told a 10-year-old she's not family. Explain to me how that's funny." Her lips pressed into a thin line. My sister-in-law jumped in quickly, her tone dismissive. "You're blowing it out of proportion. She knows we were just teasing." Ah! I felt my daughter shift against me, her small fingers digging into my sleeve. I could see the tears she was fighting to hold back. I tilted my head slightly, refusing to give them the satisfaction of seeing me unravel. "She doesn't look like she thinks it's a joke," I said, my voice steady. My father-in-law cleared his throat, his usual role as the peacemaker sliding in. "Let's not make a scene. We're trying to enjoy dinner." "Make a scene?" I asked, raising an eyebrow. The scene was made the second those words left her mouth. "I'm simply acknowledging it." My daughter finally spoke, her voice small but trembling with the effort of holding it together. "Grandma, why would you say that?" Her question sliced through me. It should never have been her job to ask. My mother-in-law leaned back, her arms crossing defensively. "Sweetheart, don't take everything so seriously. We love you. But you need to understand your place." Her place?" I echoed, my chest burning. "Her place is as a child in this family. Your grandchild. My daughter. There is no other place." My sister-in-law rolled her eyes. "You're always so sensitive. Honestly, if she can't handle a little teasing, how is she going to survive the real world?" I turned toward her, my gaze cold. The real world does not look like this table. And if it did, I'd burn the table down before I let her think cruelty is normal. For a long moment, no one spoke. The air in the room felt heavy, the smell of roasted meat and candles now cloying and sour. I could hear my daughter's shallow breathing. I could see the way her shoulders shook. She was trying to be brave, to hold herself upright, but her eyes were glassy with unshed tears. I stood slowly, guiding her to stand with me. "We're leaving," I said quietly, but firmly. My mother-in-law scoffed. "Running away again? You always overreact. She needs to learn she's not the center of the world." That was when my daughter finally broke. Her tears spilled over, rolling down her cheeks as she clung to my waist. "I just wanted to be here," she whispered, her voice cracking. "I just wanted to be part of it." The sight of her crying in front of the very people who should have protected her seared into me like fire. It was the image that would replay in my mind for nights to come. Her dress rumpled, her little hands trembling, her cheeks wet with tears she tried so hard to hide. I pulled her close, stroking her hair as I stared across the table at the ones who had caused this. "She is the center of my world," I said, my voice low but resolute. "And if you can't accept that, then you don't deserve to call yourselves family." No one argued. They just sat there, caught between indignation and silence. My husband finally spoke, his voice rough. "This has gone too far." He looked at his mother, then at his sister. "You crossed a line tonight." But even then, they refused to take responsibility. "We didn't mean it like that," my mother-in-law muttered. "She's too sensitive." I almost laughed at the absurdity of it. To wound a child and then blame her for bleeding. To cloak cruelty in the thin disguise of a joke. I shook my head and turned away. As I led my daughter toward the door, I glanced back once more. They were watching us, their faces tight, their pride refusing to let them admit fault. My sister-in-law whispered something to Bella, who giggled behind her hand. My mother-in-law sighed dramatically, as though she were the victim. I opened the door, the cool night air rushing in, a sharp contrast to the stifling room we had left behind. My daughter clung to me, her tears dampening my sleeve. I kissed her forehead and whispered, "You are family. You always will be." She nodded weakly, her breath hitching. "Promise?" "Promise," I said. And I meant it with every piece of me. When we reached the car, I settled her into the seat and wrapped her in her coat. She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand, trying to be brave again. "Are they going to hate me forever?" she asked. I shook my head. "Their hate says more about them than it ever will about you." The drive home was silent, except for her occasional sniffles. My own mind burned with anger, but I forced myself to stay calm for her sake. I knew this wasn't the end. This was only the beginning of something larger, because I had seen the look on their faces. They thought they had gotten away with it. They thought they could throw daggers at a child and then hide behind excuses. But I had the words recorded, every syllable. And soon, they would understand that some lines cannot be crossed without consequence. Back at home, long after I tucked my daughter into bed and sat alone in the living room, the night replayed in fragments. The insult had been sharp, but it wasn't born in isolation. It was the final crack in a wall that had been splintering for years. I thought back to the first time I realized they viewed my daughter as lesser. She was only 4 then, standing in the middle of a Christmas gathering with her small hands clutching the gift she had wrapped herself. She had been so excited, bouncing on her toes, waiting for Grandma to open it, but when the paper came off and revealed a clay ornament shaped like a star, my mother-in-law laughed lightly. "Oh, how rustic." She set it aside without another word. Seconds later, Bella handed her a store-bought candle and received a hug, a kiss, and a round of applause. My daughter's smile wilted before my eyes. That became the pattern. Whatever she brought, whatever she did, it was always deemed too little, too messy, too insignificant. Bella, on the other hand, could so much as scribble her name on a napkin, and it would be displayed like fine art. When my daughter turned 6, she invited her grandparents to her small birthday party at our house. She spent hours drawing handmade invitations, coloring balloons and cupcakes on each card. I hand-delivered one to my mother-in-law. She accepted it with a nod, no warmth. On the day of the party, she called an hour before to say they would not make it. "Bella has a piano recital, and we can't miss it." They didn't even ask how my daughter felt. I remember her sitting on the porch steps in her party dress, clutching the unopened gift she had picked out for them. By the time she was 8, the comparisons had grown sharper. At a family reunion, the children played a game of charades. My daughter guessed 3 in a row, earning cheers from the cousins. But when Bella guessed incorrectly, my sister-in-law clapped anyway and said, "She's still the smartest one here." The adults laughed. My daughter shrank into my side, whispering, "Why don't they ever cheer for me?" I wanted to scream then, but I told her gently, "Because sometimes people only see what they want to see. That doesn't make it true." Over the years, my mother-in-law crafted her narrative carefully. Bella was the star. My daughter was background noise. Every dinner, every holiday, every gathering reinforced that hierarchy. They acted as though my daughter was lucky just to be in the room, like her presence required justification. And then there was my husband, caught in the middle. He loved our daughter fiercely, but he was bound by the invisible threads of loyalty to his mother. He saw the favoritism, but when I brought it up, he would say things like, "That's just how she is," or, "It's easier if we don't make it a fight." His silence became complicity, and my daughter noticed. Children always notice. I remembered last Easter vividly. The grandchildren were given baskets filled with chocolates, toys, and stuffed animals. Bella's basket overflowed, a cascade of ribbons and treats. My daughter's basket was smaller, with a few candies tossed inside like an afterthought. She tried to hide her disappointment, but later that night she asked me, "Am I less special?" I told her no, but my voice cracked. She caught it. What cut deepest was not just the favoritism, but the deliberate exclusion. There were family photos where my daughter was positioned at the edge, half cropped out. There were vacations planned without inviting us, then shared proudly on social media. And when I confronted my mother-in-law once, asking why she always overlooked my child, she said with a smile, "You're too sensitive. Bella just needs more attention." It was that line, "Bella needs more," that echoed in me. More attention, more praise, more love. And my daughter? Apparently, she needed less. The cruelty wasn't random. It was woven into the very fabric of how they saw family. To them, my daughter was an outsider because she came from me. I had never been fully accepted, so neither was she. My mother-in-law wore her disapproval of me like a badge, passing it down to the next generation. And now, with 4 little words, she had said it out loud. "You're not family." Oh, that sentence carried the weight of all the years they had tried to erase her place. It was not an accident. It was a declaration. As I sat in the quiet of my living room, I thought about the toll it had taken on my daughter. The way she always tried harder, The way she lit up when she thought she had earned their approval, the way she broke quietly when she hadn't. 10 years old, already carrying the weight of rejection that should never be laid on a child's shoulders. I also thought about the subtle ways they had tried to undermine me as a mother. My mother-in-law often corrected me in front of my daughter, contradicting my rules. "Oh, let her have more dessert. You're too strict." Or, "She doesn't need to say please every time, it's just family." Each time, it chipped away at my authority, making my daughter wonder whose word truly mattered. The message was clear. My role as a mother was negotiable. My daughter's role as family was conditional, and both were subject to the whims of my mother-in-law's approval. That night's insult was not just about my daughter. It was about years of control, manipulation, and favoritism finally revealing themselves in their ugliest form. I poured myself a glass of water and stared at the reflection in the window. For so long, I had tried to smooth things over. I had told myself it was better not to fight, that keeping the peace mattered more. But peace built on silencing my child was no peace at all. My daughter's tears at that table were the breaking point. No more ignoring, no more excusing, no more pretending. They had declared her an outsider, and in doing so, they had declared war on me as her mother. The truth was stark. If I allowed this to pass again, my daughter would learn a dangerous lesson that cruelty is acceptable if it comes from family, that love must be earned through silence and obedience. I would not let that be her inheritance. So as the dawn approached, I made a vow to myself. I would draw a line, one they could never step over again. The family they thought they owned was no longer theirs to define, and the little girl they tried to erase would become the center of the story they could not control. The morning light streamed weakly through the curtains when my phone buzzed. A message from Officer Daniels confirmed he would meet me at the station within the hour. My daughter was still asleep, her breathing steady at last, but I knew she would wake to questions. I brushed her hair from her forehead and whispered, "Stay home with Dad for a bit. I'll be back soon." At the police station, the air smelled faintly of disinfectant and burnt coffee. Officer Daniels, a kind man in his 50s, greeted me with a firm handshake. "You said you had evidence?" he asked. I pulled the small recorder from my purse and set it on the desk. He pressed play. The room filled with the unmistakable voice of my mother-in-law. "You're not family. Clear, cold, cruel." Daniels raised his eyebrows. "That's direct," he muttered. "And the child's reaction?" "She cried," I said flatly. "She hasn't been the same since. This isn't the first time they've treated her like this, but it's the first time I have proof." He nodded, scribbling notes. Verbal abuse can be tricky, but given her age and the impact, Child Protective Services will want to review this. He tapped his pen against the paper. "Do you want to press charges or pursue mediation first?" "I want to protect my daughter," I replied, "whatever that takes." By the time I left the station, the weight on my chest felt lighter. I had done what I promised my daughter. I had not let it slide. But I also knew this would not stay quiet. Within hours, word traveled back to the family. The first call came from my sister-in-law. Her voice was sharp, venom dripping with every word. "You went to the police? Over a joke?" "A joke?" I repeated, my voice calm but firm. "You watched her cry. You call that a joke?" "You're pathetic," she spat. "Dragging outsiders into family business. Do you know what you've done? Mom is hysterical. Dad says you've disgraced us." I almost laughed. "Disgrace?" I said. "Number. What's disgraceful is telling a child she isn't family. If the police agree, then so be it." I hung up before she could continue. Minutes later, my phone buzzed again. This time it was my mother-in-law herself. Her tone was different, half fury, half trembling. "How dare you bring strangers into our home? You think you can embarrass us like this? We raised our son better than to marry someone who turns everything into a spectacle." I listened quietly until she paused. Then I said, "This isn't about me. This is about a 10-year-old girl who deserves to feel loved. And you made sure she didn't." Her breath hissed through the line. "You'll regret this." Then she slammed the call shut. By afternoon, the storm had spread. My husband came home early, his face pale. "They called me nonstop," he said, dropping his phone on the counter. "They're furious. They're saying you're trying to destroy the family." "I'm trying to save our daughter," I corrected. "If they see that as destruction, Then maybe the family was never worth saving. He rubbed his temples, torn between loyalty and truth. What happens now? They'll be contacted by the authorities, I explained. There may be interviews, they'll be asked to explain themselves. Sure enough, by evening, the phone calls escalated into pounding at our door. Through the peephole, I saw my father-in-law, his face flushed red. I hesitated, then opened the door just enough to stand firmly in the frame. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" he barked. "You called the police on your own family?" "You heard what was said," I replied coolly. "Do you deny it?" He shifted uncomfortably, but refused to answer. Instead, he jabbed a finger toward me. "You're tearing this family apart. Over words. Words. Words can break a child," I said softly. "And you know it." Behind him, my mother-in-law appeared, her eyes glassy with tears she forced for effect. "We love her," she insisted. "We've always loved her, but she needs to understand she's different." "Different?" I repeated. My voice rose, sharp enough to cut the air. "Different how? Because she came from me? Because she's not your perfect Bella? She is a child, your granddaughter, and you told her she doesn't belong." Neighbors had begun to peek through their blinds. My daughter stood in the hallway, clutching her stuffed animal, her eyes wide with fear. I closed the door firmly, shutting them out. Inside, I knelt by my daughter. "It's okay," I whispered. "The police know. They'll handle it." She nodded, but her voice was shaky. "Are they going to take me away?" My heart shattered. "No, sweetheart," I said, holding her close. "No one is taking you anywhere. I will never let that happen." That night, the tension thickened. My phone lit up with messages from extended relatives, each taking sides. Some accused me of overreacting. Others whispered their quiet support. One cousin texted, "Finally, someone stood up to them." Oh. The next morning, an official letter arrived, summoning us for a formal interview with Child Protective Services. It was no longer just a family fight. It was now on record. The backlash was immediate. My sister-in-law unleashed a tirade on social media, painting me as vindictive, unstable, a woman who weaponized her child for attention. Photos of Bella smiling were plastered with captions like, "True family knows love." The comments were split, some praising them, others questioning what kind of grandmother tells a child she isn't family. Through it all, I stayed quiet. Silence was louder than their noise. I had evidence. I had the truth. And soon, the authorities would have it too. My husband sat beside me that night, finally breaking his own silence. "I should have defended her," he admitted, his voice thick. "I was a coward. But I'm with you now. Whatever comes, I'm with you." Ho! I took his hand, relief flooding me. For the first time in years, I felt like we were standing on the same side of the battlefield. As the days unfolded, the family's outrage grew. They threatened to cut us off, to smear my name, to take me to court. But every threat only proved how far they were willing to go to protect their pride instead of their granddaughter. And in the middle of it all, my daughter looked at me one evening and asked, "Mom, are we going to be okay?" I hugged her tightly, pressing my cheek against her hair. "Yes," I said. "We are going to be better than okay, because now the truth is out, and no one can take it back." The letter from Child Protective Services marked the beginning of a new chapter. For once, the weight of proof did not rest solely on my shoulders. The recording spoke louder than any excuse. My daughter's tears in front of witnesses carried more truth than their carefully rehearsed denials. The interviews were not easy. My daughter sat in a quiet room with a kind woman who asked gentle questions. She twisted the silver star necklace between her fingers, her voice small but clear. "She told me I wasn't family," she said. The officer nodded, her eyes soft with understanding. "How did that make you feel?" "Like I didn't belong," my daughter whispered. My heart broke all over again, but pride swelled too. She was brave enough to speak the truth. I gave my own account, laying out the years of favoritism and exclusion. I presented the photographs where my daughter was cropped out. I showed the text messages where my concerns were dismissed. Piece by piece, the pattern became undeniable. The authorities promised to follow up. "At the very least, there will be restrictions," Officer Daniels told me. "Your daughter will not be forced into environments that are hostile to her. They'll have to answer for what they did." News spread quickly through the family. Some relatives called in shock, others in hushed relief. A cousin admitted, "We always saw it, but we didn't want to get involved." That sentence stuck with me. Silence had protected the abusers more than any lie. My mother-in-law's response was predictable. She sent an email, long and winding, painting herself as the victim. "I never meant to hurt her. You twisted my words. You've ruined our reputation." My sister-in-law followed with her own rant, accusing me of tearing the family apart. They tried every tactic, guilt, anger, threats. But none of it moved me. For once, I felt untouchable. Not because I was unscathed, but because I was anchored by something stronger than their manipulation. My daughter. The weeks that followed were calmer than I expected. With official eyes watching, they kept their distance. No surprise visits, no shouting at my doorstep, just silence, thick and heavy, the kind that comes after a storm has ripped through and left wreckage behind. My husband stood by me more firmly now. He told his parents directly, "If you can't respect my wife and daughter, then you won't be part of our lives." It was the first time I had heard that line drawn from his lips, and it mattered more than he knew. My daughter began to heal in small ways. She started drawing again, filling pages with bright colors instead of the muted sketches she had been making. She invited a friend over after school and laughed so loudly it echoed through the house. One night, she asked, "Mom, do you think I'll ever feel like I belong?" I hugged her and said, "You already do. With me. Always." The family, of course, tried to spin the story. On social media, they posted pictures of Bella surrounded by adoring grandparents, captions about true family love. But the silence beneath the images spoke volumes. People knew something was off. Friends messaged me quietly. "Stay strong. You did the right thing." Even distant relatives admitted, "She always had favorites. Maybe now she'll learn." But I wasn't waiting for their learning. I wasn't waiting for their apology either. The apology that comes after being forced is no apology at all. I was building something different. I began creating new traditions with my daughter. Friday movie nights with popcorn and blankets piled high. Sunday walks in the park where we fed ducks and talked about anything she wanted. Birthdays celebrated exactly as she dreamed, with balloons, cake, and people who cherished her. At Christmas, instead of the suffocating family dinner, we decorated our own small tree and sang carols together. She said, "This feels more like family than anything before." I agreed. Still, there were moments when the hurt returned like a whisper. At school events, when she saw other grandparents cheering loudly for their grandchildren, I saw the flicker in her eyes. She wanted that too. I couldn't give her different grandparents, but I could give her truth. "They failed you," I told her once, when she asked why. "That doesn't mean you're less. It means they were too small to see how big your heart is." She nodded slowly, holding my hand tighter. The investigation concluded after several weeks. The result? Mandatory counseling for my mother-in-law, supervised contact only if my daughter requested it, and a written record of the verbal abuse. It wasn't prison bars or handcuffs, but it was accountability. It was a mark on paper that said, "This happened. It was wrong." That mattered. My mother-in-law tried once more to regain control. She called, her voice trembling. "We can fix this. Let's forget the past." I listened, then answered, "The past is written. My daughter will never forget. And I won't let her." I ended the call before she could continue. There was power in that click, in the refusal to keep playing their game. Months later, my daughter stood taller. She joined a school play, beaming when she saw me clapping in the audience. She said afterward, "I knew you'd cheer the loudest." That was when I realized the most important truth. She didn't need everyone to love her. She just needed to know that I always would. The family might never change. They might cling to their pride until the end. But I no longer cared. Their rejection had carved a wound, but it had also carved clarity. Family is not defined by blood or by tradition. It is defined by love, by protection, by showing up when it matters most. And when they told my daughter she wasn't family, they revealed the truth. They weren't family either. I don't know if they will ever realize what they lost that night. A granddaughter who only ever wanted to belong. A daughter-in-law who tried for years to keep peace. A son who finally saw through the fog. Maybe one day they'll look around their table and notice the empty chairs. Maybe they'll remember the little girl with the silver star necklace and wonder why she isn't there. By then, it will be too late, because I have built something stronger, something they can't touch. My daughter knows she is loved, unconditionally and without doubt. She knows that when someone tries to erase her, her mother will fight with every breath to write her back into the story. And I know this. I may have lost the illusion of family that night, but I gained the truth. Sometimes the bravest act of love is to walk away from those who refuse to see you. So when I close my eyes at night and remember her tears at that table, I also remember her laughter now, free and unburdened. That is the sound of victory.